Marriages were arranged for children after onset of puberty. The boy's parent would send an intermediary, usually an uncle or a family friend, to establish whether he was ready to get married. If he was deemed ready, the intermediary would identify a suitable girl. This intermediary would investigate family's morale, the harmony between the parents, the children's educations, the mother's character, seen as influential for a child development, their socio-economic condition, as well as the girl's behavior, her quality as a future wife, her health, activities, morality, modesty, difference to elders, obedience, and collaboration in the household chores, etc. Once a suitable girl was found, the spirits of ancestors will be consulted through a ceremony. In this ceremony, an ancestor will be identified in whose name the marriage will be celebrated. Once the approval of the ancestors was obtained, the process of asking for a wife, gusaba umugeni, could begin. The intermediary, along with other men representing the boy's family, would initially visit the girl's family with jugs of bananas and sorghum beer. In turn, the girl's family would then conduct their own inquiry into the prospective groom's family. Should no obstacles to the marriage arise during these inquiries, a second meeting would take place. Further arrangements would concern the amount of bride's wealth that would be paid by the groom's family to the brides. Payments would range from number of cows to the sale of farming equipment to the rendering of agricultural labor services. Once the amount was established, a date for the official demand and delivery of the bride wealth would be set. The wedding ceremony. On the set date, a delegation from the groom's family went to the bride's home bearing jugs of beer, traditional baskets, and the jugs of demand, ekibindi kisabiro. This group would comprise relatives and family friends chosen by the groom's father. One older man would be the representative speaker and would officially demand the bride. A similar representative will be chosen by the bride's father and would represent her family during the ceremony. The bride and groom would not be present during this ceremony. The main component of this ceremony was the discussion between the family representatives, followed by the delivery of the bride's wealth. The bride's family, playing host to the delegation from the groom's family, would pretend not to know the reason for their visit and would pretend that the bride to be was not ready for marriage or was not to be found. Overall, this is a light-hearted event meant to entertain everyone present. What followed in Isango was the delivery of the bride's wealth. If the payment included cows, a traditional poet would be called onto stage to declaim the names of the cows amazina y'inka in the form of poetry, in which the qualities of the cows were celebrated. To give a better sense of the light-hearted mood of the ceremony, the following are some imisango from colonial times. Groom's umukwe mukuru, giving the hoe to the representative of the bride's family. I have come here not only to bring you beer to calm your thirst. Here you have a precious implement with which you will cultivate better and produce good harvests. Now listen to me, because I have something to say. The name of the father of the boy has sent me here. Here are the beer, the hoe, and the cow that he asked me to bring to you. Your family has lived together with ours. You are friends and brothers. We have helped each other in times of sorrow and need, but this relationship has not been recently initiated. It dates back to the ancient times. Then they say the clan of the bride's lineage have given a lot of daughters to our sons so far. I can't even count the number of women that have become mothers of our children. The boy's father is now asking you to renew this tradition. He's asking you to give us another daughter to marry. Bride's Mokwemkuru. It is true. What you have just said is important. What you have declared is true. The relationship between our clans dates back to an old times. And on both sides, several families have exchanged women. However, this time I'm sorry to be obliged to say no. In our family, several girls have reached the marriage age, but for each of them, we have already received the bride's wealth. Their father wouldn't like me to antagonize those noble people to whom we have already given our word. Grooms Mokomokoro. We are not asking the hand of a girl who's already engaged. Ours is surely free. We have got the right information. Brides Mokomokoro. Which girl are you referring to? Grooms Mokomokoro. Her name is, then they say the name of the girl. Brides Mokomokoro. Oh, you mean her? I'm sorry, I was not considering that one, but she's too young. She has not reached marriage age yet. This is why I didn't refer to her when I answered you. Grooms Mukemukuro. It doesn't matter. You think she's not the right age to get married. However, we ourselves think that she's totally fine and we wouldn't want her to be any different. And we are more involved than you in this issue. Bride Mukemukuro. Very well. Since you want her so much, I'll give her to you. Then shouts of joy will be followed. This ceremony formalized the betrothal, and the dates for the marriage would then be fixed. In the period between the betrothal and marriage, both families underwent religious rituals, kubandwa, and made offerings guterichera to their ancestors. Traditional medicines were administered to the boy and girl in order to ensure their safety after marriage and protection of their lineages. The groom's relatives made sure that the hut in their compound where the couple would live after their marriage was ready. The bride's family helped her assemble all the possessions she would take to her new home. On the evening of the marriage, paternal aunt, cousin, old women, and married friends were invited to the girl's place. They would advise her on her future life, including how she was to behave towards her husband, his mother, how he was to welcome visitors, and how he should prepare food, and gave her sexual tips. Yeah. Thereafter, the girl was prepared for the next day, including shaving her hair, except for the piece socially designated her as a girl, washing her and rubbing her with cow's milk butter to make her skin soft and shiny. A marriage in the night. The bride would be accompanied by entourage consisting of married men, boys, sons, girls, as well as a sister or a friend who would assist her throughout the ceremony, umushingira. The bride's parent would stay at home and wait for the entourage to return and tell them about it. Rich girls would be carried to their weddings, while others would walk. This is terrible. In either case, the bride was hidden by a mat so that no one could see her. The entourage would time their arrival at the groom's house at night, and the bride and the other girls would be secluded in a hut. The men were welcomed inside the groom's parents. The representatives of both families would give speeches and therewith officiate the alliance between the families. Yeah. The families would spend hours talking together and drinking beer. Around midnight, the father of the groom would call his son, ordering him to perform the central act of formalizing the union. Spicy. The groom would enter the girl's hut holding a branch in his one hand, a mixture of herbs and milk in his mouth. Interesting. He would identify his bride among the girls, then spread the liquid on her and tie the branch around her head, saying loudly, Ndakurongoye, I marry you. This will be followed by cries of joy and congratulations from those gathered around. After the bride's entourage departs, the groom would have to consummate the marriage. The bride, slippery from the batter, would have to fight strenuously to defend her virginity, while the groom, egged on by friends and brothers eavesdropping outside, would have to subdue her. Ooh. The next day, the groom was welcomed by his family as a hero and rewarded with a cow. Okay, milk for the bride. Post-marriage rituals. Several rituals would take place after the marriage itself in order to transform the girl, who was still a bride, into a complete woman, wife. Traditions include seclusion of the wife, her gradual reintroduction to domestic life and duties, through to the husband cutting her hair, including the last piece of hair, making her as a child. These rituals will be finalized after a couple of months with the visit by the couples to the bride's family. Birth and naming. In Rwandan society, a birth is an eagerly anticipated event. According to the custom, although a child belongs to the father and the mother, she also belongs to the extended family. In addition, all the adults are responsible for all the children in the neighborhood, not just their own. In the week after the birth, the extended family and neighbors would come to visit the mother, bringing sorghum flour and bundles of wood to warm the hut. On the 8th day after the birth, ceremonies were held to name the newborn. The family prepared traditional sorghum and banana beer for the adults of the village, and some of the guests would bring drinks. All the children of the village, aged between 3 and 8 years, would come to share food, generally sorghum dough and beans mixed with squash. After the adults had chatted and drunk the beer, each of the children present would propose a name. Thereafter, the parents of the baby would announce the name they had chosen for their child. The guests would leave knowing the true name of the child. The essence of the ceremony is publicly announcing the name of the newborn. I mean, these days, these rituals are no longer happening. You go to the hospital knowing the name of your baby, and you have to register your baby before you leave the hospital. So I guess this is one part of the culture that kind of evolved. Now, third topic, death. Rwandans accept death as an inevitable part of life. There's a proverb that says, when the owner of the bracelet comes, you just reach out. In other words, God is removing the bracelet from your arm and you must go with him. Ceremonies connected with the burial of a parent were different from those for a child or someone who died before marriage. Ooh, okay. In normal course of events, a father sensing the end of his days approaching would ask for beer to be prepared without giving a reason. When it was ready, he would call his children together and explain the division of his estate. He would divide his property and his cattle equally among his male children, keeping one part for his wife. After her death, that portion would go to the person he had designated as the head of the household. Traditionally, the girls receiving nothing because it was assumed that they would marry and their husband's inheritance would provide for them. In the case of divorce, they would return to their families and be taken care of by the head of the family. This is why the new head would eventually also inherit also the mother's share of land and livestock. Okay. Once the issue of inheritance was out of the way, the father would quietly wait to die. After his death, his family immediately organized the funeral. One of his children would go ahead of the father's body into the tomb, symbolizing that the child is accompanying the parent. A family representative would announce that the family was giving him a cow as a sign that he expected to get out of the grave. Yeah, this is something. A person who died before being married was buried with charcoal, so his spirit would not return to disturb members of the family. The duration of the mourning period was 8 days for anyone who died after starting a family, and 3 days for anyone who had not